Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to Todd's podcast. We're going to do something a little different today for our podcast. We have two guests, and have not done that so far, but we're going to be talking about algae. And we've got two folks that are going to make it sound interesting and intriguing and why we need to be paying attention to algae. One of our guests today is Dan Levy. He is PG and VP at Vice President at AECOM. AECOM is a multinational infrastructure consulting firm. Dan is known for his pioneering contributions to environmental innovation with his career spanning over 3 decades. You don't look that old, but I'm assuming you started early on. Dan is the founder of the AECOM algae practice, and he has spearheaded the creation and the development of some of the more transformative solutions to tackle some of the most critical challenges that we have. He's consistently been at the forefront of technological progress and also introducing initiatives such as dredge technology for the removal of nutrient-impacted sediment and is aimed at revitalizing nutrient-impacted waterways. Dan's primary focus is harmful algal bloom mitigation, and he is here to tell us why we need to pay attention to it. Also with us today is Cynthia Henderson. Cynthia has been a longtime friend of mine, lives in Tallahassee, and she began her career as an attorney and public affairs consultant, in which she used it to help her clients succeed in the land development business. She was recruited and appointed by Governor Jeb Bush to serve as the secretary of the Department of Professional and Business Regulation and the secretary of the Department of Management Services. Did I butcher that correctly? I was close.
You were very close.
In 2003, she incorporated Synergy and has been gaining clients on her vast expertise and her ongoing relationships that she has with both the executive and the legislative branches of government in Tallahassee. She's a member of the Florida Bar, a real estate agent, and she was licensed insurance agent with the Florida Department of Financial Services. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with you today.
So we have two extremely accomplished folks here. One I've known for a long time, one I met fairly recently, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what it is that you do, why it's a problem, why we need to be paying attention to this, what the government's doing, and what are some solutions if you're okay trying to do that. If you could not get it too wonky so people like me can understand it. In our couple of conversations, I think you have the ability to do that. So I look forward to you being here. I want us, at the end of this, to have a better understanding of our efforts to clean up our waters, not just here in Polk County, because this is not just a Polk County project. You're not just a Polk County person. You do these things all over the world, all over the United States. And algae is a problem all over the world, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
Help us understand the issue with algae and what issues it causes for our bodies of water. Is this a recent issue that has emerged, or is this something that's been around for eons, or is this the proliferation and population of Florida, has that exacerbated the problem?
Well, first, Todd, it's an honor to be here, and thank you for giving us the opportunity and the platform to share a little bit about algae. It really, for everybody, for your listeners, algae was essential for our planet. As you mentioned, I'm a geologist. As the world was formed billions of years ago, algae played a key role in providing oxygen to our planet, and also provides a key role for all the food habitat in our aquatic systems. But today, 2024, with over 8 billion people on the planet, we are now starting to stress some of these systems out. And really in the last decade, we noticed that the algae was accumulating a little bit more rapidly. Not just in our freshwater systems, but also in saltwater systems. You hear about the red tide and everything else. So part of this is because of human interaction. We do have a lot more stresses on our environment. We've used a lot of property for homes, development, et cetera. So that puts a little bit more stress on our natural water bodies. And what has happened is we're getting a little bit too much food, and the algae is starting to grow a little bit more rapidly. And in the last decade, either because of climate change, the anthropogenic sources of the people.
The what?
the anthropogenic sources, meaning the amount of influence that we've had on our planet.
Okay.
When we have 8 billion people, we do a lot of infrastructure. So the human interaction on our planet, roads, bridges, et cetera, really take our infrastructure and change it from what it was once, what it was naturally. And we're starting to see a change from the healthy algae to more blue-green algae. It's a bacteria, but it could be considered a cyanotoxin. So we're starting to see more and more cyanotoxins, more and more of these what we call harmful algal blooms, and we abbreviate them as HABs, throughout the world. And when we started looking at this, China was really the first, again, over 1 billion people on that, part of the world. Their water systems really started becoming problematic. Green algae, cyanotoxins, choking out a lot of the ecosystem. So we decided after Florida got hit really bad in 2016, at that time Governor Scott was here, and we had a state of emergency on the East Coast. I mean, we essentially turned our beaches green in South Florida. I took it upon myself at that point to say, hey, we need to figure something out. And fortunately, my youngest son was also in school at FSU. I know you have a big alligator out front, but the other part...
Seminoles for lunch
Yes.
around here.
Exactly. I did feel a little reserved coming in.
We have a
but,
couple of Seminoles that work here, so it's like we're equal opportunity employers.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate that. So what we did is I essentially assigned my youngest son, Jack, at the time to look into what's going on, who's leading the research, what do we have available to tackle these harmful algal blooms. And at that time, there really wasn't much out on the market. A lot of it was all based on chemical treatments, a lot of quick fixes, but nothing that would be considered sustainable. So that kind of led myself, and then through the support of AECOM, allowed us to develop a research tank within the firm to focus specifically on this issue.
You mentioned 2016. I don't remember that being a crisis here in Florida. Maybe I wasn't paying attention because I'm in the interior, not over on the coast.
Yeah, it got so bad, it actually happened July 4th. And there was a lot of photos of the residents in South Florida, really around Martin County, that had the green water coming up on their beaches. At that time, a lot of water was discharged from Lake Okeechobee out to the east along the St. Lucie River.
So if it goes from a freshwater to a saltwater body, it doesn't just die off. It's that tough or resilient, maybe is a better word.
No, and I'm glad you asked that because, I guess for the listeners here, if we can, everybody in our state knows how valuable Lake Okeechobee is. It's a beautiful water body, or was a beautiful water body. Today, it's becoming a little on the sick side, and we need to find ways to correct that. But the way the lake is designed, if it gets too high, we have to let water out. Otherwise, we would have a problem with flooding, dikes, etc. So when they let the water out, and you can visualize how big Lake Okeechobee is, 730 square miles. Right. So when they let water out, it's not a few gallons, it's billions of gallons a day. And it doesn't happen over one day, it happens over weeks, if not months. So at that time, we probably discharged somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 billion gallons of water. So when you discharge that volume of water, it creates essentially a bubble. The algae can thrive during those periods.
But it doesn't go south and filter through the Everglades, and before it goes out. That's the depth of my understanding of this, but
it did at one point. At one point, the natural Everglades system allowed water to spill over,
right,
over the lake and into the South Florida area and into the Everglades. But as we developed our state, and because of flooding,
Sugar.
Because of agriculture,
Yep.
because of everything, we essentially put a barrier, a berm around the lake.
Right.
And by doing that, we've now regulated a natural habitat. And what we've found really over time is that the Florida Everglades can't handle too much phosphorus.
Right. It seems like in our effort to clean up bodies of water to make things better, we redirect them, we berm them, we do all sorts of stuff that are so unnatural. Is that what's a big part of the contributing factor to algal bloom or the degradation of these huge bodies of water? Is it man's influence of trying to help, but they go too far?
Absolutely. And you bring up an excellent point. I mean, we're here on this planet, and we need, as we're getting further and further in our years, we're understanding that we need to work with nature, live with nature, and there's consequences if we don't. Back in the 70s or probably earlier, when it was thought that the Melaleuca tree would be a good thing. We wanted to drain the swamp, essentially, to allow residents to live in South Florida. So there was a decision made by the government to plant a Melaleuca tree, which turned out to be a bad decision. At the time, it seemed good. They picked up water, but they spread wild. So, yes, we have made decisions over the course of history. Some of them have not been perfect. The good news is we've always found a way to get out of them. Right now, we're in one of those circumstances. We now are seeing the problems with all this nutrient runoff. A lot of it comes from the agricultural sector. Others come from the wastewater, septic tanks, et cetera. But yes, we're in the process now of trying to use science to solve those problems.
So what is your solution that y'all have come up with? And you told me a little bit about it. One quick question. Has anyone surveyed all the bodies of water in Florida?
Well, yes.
And you've identified, hey, these are the worst, or, how do you identify what you're going to tackle next?
Well, that's a very good question. Most states have a good survey of their water bodies. Obviously, Florida, Lake Okeechobee would be the number one water body with a problem. It happens to be, unfortunately, be our biggest water body. So we kind of resonate in our country of having the biggest problem. And if you think about it, we're all in Florida for the fact that it's a beautiful state. We got plenty of sunshine, but the algae seem to like it too. That's also a great habitat for them.
Is Okeechobee worse than Hancock? Hancock's the largest lake we have here in Polk County.
Hancock is a little bit more nutrient rich. So I would have to say on that scale, there's more algae in Hancock than there is in Okeechobee. But we're talking, you don't want to be in that competition.
Yeah.
And it can depend on what time of year you're at. But
I think they both grow some of the biggest alligators in the state as well.
I would think so. Actually, I think Jessup probably has more alligators than any other lake.
Really?
Yeah.
So you've been focusing on the problem. What are you trying to do to help? What is your process for trying to solve those algae bloom? So
our focus, when we really look back and peel the onion back on what's causing harmful algal blooms and why are they so prevalent today, was really the fact that we're getting more nutrients. So we decided that if we can get nutrients out, and really that's what a lot of the wetlands were designed for. And if you don't have to look far in Florida to see what we're doing in South Florida, hundreds of thousands of acres are being used to take nutrients out through our STAs and so on. But that is not really applicable throughout the rest of the state and the rest of the world. We don't have that kind of land mass. So we need to come up with something that would work with our society. As our urban developments are there, we were looking for something that could act like a wetland, take nutrients out, but do it at a smaller scale. So we developed the algae harvester. It's actually, I'm going to use the official name, it's a hydronucleation system.
Did you get that, Eli?
God, I wrote it down.
Okay.
All right.
There'll be a test afterwards.
So yes, we will give test afterwards. But the system was really designed to rapidly separate intact algae cells from the water. And the reason why we were focusing on algae, we wanted to harness the power of algae. Algae does amazing things. It really takes the CO2 out of the atmosphere and releases oxygen back. It takes the dissolved nitrogen and phosphorus out of the water and essentially does this rapidly, and they multiply rapidly. So when you compare the photosynthesis or the ability for algae to take CO2 out of the atmosphere versus a tree, it's 400 times more efficient. So if we could harness that kind of power that algae has to take the nutrients out, we decided if we can get a technology to take algae out of the water without rupturing or lysing the cell, take it out, we can also get the nutrients out, we can get the carbon out, and if there happens to be any cyanotoxins, we can take those out as well. And then we can separate that and return back clean processed water. So today, I gave you a jar of the Lake Hancock water, which was bright green. Our process would essentially filter that rapidly, and you would end up with clear water going back to the lake.
Is it potable?
We can make it. We can turn this into potable water. I think that might be an overkill and an overstretch for the size of what we want to do. But in circumstances, especially when we're out on the west part of our country in California and Arizona, where they need the water, I think that's going to be a viable option for them.
Todd's podcast is sponsored in part by SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate. Since 1996, the firm has offered unrivaled brokerage services throughout Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. With over 90 expert advisors throughout the region, our team has the knowledge and resources to help clients realize their most ambitious real estate investment goals. When you choose SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, you have access to a diverse suite of commercial and land services, including forestry consulting, land management, auctions, property management, commercial leasing, and negotiating conservation easements. If you're seeking to invest in land or explore commercial real estate opportunities in the Southeast, contact us today at svnsaunders.com or call 877-518-5263 to connect with an advisor today. Once again, that's svnsaunders.com or by phone at 877-518-5263.
So this is a big piece of equipment or a small piece of equipment that you use depending on the size of the body of water, or is the piece of equipment the same and you just put 10 of them in instead of one? Is it scalable? Is that how you operate?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly how we operate. And because algae can be a little finicky, it can have flare-ups, and you might need, we decided to really launch this, that we needed to have something mobile. So we built our large system the size of a tractor trailer. It's 40 feet long, and it can be moved on American roads without any issue. And to your point, these are modular, so we can stack them. So if we, our harvester size, the tractor trailer size, processes 1 million gallons of water per day. So a little bit more actually, but if we simplify that, if we wanted to have a 10 MGD, 10 million gallons a day treatment system, instead of building a brick and mortar system like you would see for a water treatment plant,
right,
which takes years and tens of millions of dollars, we can essentially assemble this in a matter of days. Just by, to your point, wheeling up 10 of these harvesters, connecting them, and turning them on. That's the mission, that's the goal. We wanted to have something scalable, but we also wanted to have states have some tools available so we can have these sitting on lakes that need immediate attention, and then if there's a flare-up, we can then pick these units up and move to that particular issue, kind of like a fire truck.
Would you just keep a unit by a lake just for regular routine maintenance, or do you wait till it gets to a certain level, then you bring them in?
Well, to that point, when we looked at the fire truck model,
right,
instead of keeping a fire truck in perfect shape inside an actual storage area, we decided that we wanted to keep these things running 24 hours a day. It makes sense. That's the best way to use your assets.
They're mobile, so you may as well.
Right. So we can put them on lakes like Okeechobee and let them sit there and run continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then if we do have issues or concerns or crisis that might happen, we can pick these up and move them. We just finished a project over in Brevard County this last summer where we put them on barges. Essentially, we put this big unit on a barge and we went up and down the IRL to demonstrate how we can work in a saltwater area.
So what's your power source for running these things?
We would
solar, diesel.
Today
electric?
we're gonna use electric power,
Okay.
essentially, but when we're on a barge, we're gonna use a generator.
How many would you need for Lake Okeechobee, just to give us some idea, and then we'll scale it down to smaller lakes? But I mean, would you use 10 there?
No, you would be in about the 200
Okay.
number space to really make a dent.
So once you run the water through and you discharge almost potable water or much cleaner water, you've got this byproduct of the algae left. What do you do with that?
Well, that really was the next step. Our first focus was on cleaning the water. How do we
Okay.
protect our natural resources? How do we prevent people from getting sick? How do we keep that working? The next part, and you hit it right there, was, well, now what do we do with this biomass? Our first plan, we were just going to take that and go to a landfill with it and treat it as a waste. But several years ago, we were looking through potential values of that. And one of the things that could be done with that, today, there's manufacturers that are taking that algae and using it for commercial products, essentially creating shoes, sneakers, foam products, which is great. But I think a better application for us would be on the agricultural side, because when we look at what's in the algae, we have a tremendous amount of nitrogen and phosphorus and carbon. 70% of an algae cell is carbon. So we just finished a research project with the University of Florida and the Northwest Florida Water Management District. This was funded by the EPA, and we were up at the main nursery up in Havana, Florida. And essentially, we were taking the nursery runoff, which stays in a holding pond, and filtering that water, essentially treating that pond and taking that algae biomass and using it as a fertilizer. And the study is not public yet, but it will be later on in the year. But the University of Florida was able to show that the algae fertilizer can be almost effective in plant height as mineral fertilizer. And then we looked at the seed production, it was more appropriate at a 50-50 blend. So in the first study, which I think we can obviously find better uses, showed that the algae could displace or be used to reduce the amount of commercial fertilizers by 50%. So essentially, when you look at agriculture, and you don't have to really look far, the world uses about 200 million tons of fertilizer every single year. And being in Polk County, this is a very ag-central county, I would venture to guess most of the agricultural listeners here would say that the crops only take up about 50% of that fertilizer. So the other 50% is lost, and it goes back into our waterways. So if we look at the world, we're essentially fertilizing 100 million metric tons of fertilizer into our waterways every single year. The U.S. uses 10% of all the fertilizer. So we are essentially losing 10 million tons of fertilizer every single year. And if we can work with farmers to give them tools, harvesting tools, that they can use to get some of that back, that just makes logical sense. That's a sustainable process.
And is this technology that you at AECOM have developed, or the equipment, is this what y'all have developed? Is this all proprietary to
Correct.
your
Yes,
group and your company and you?
Yes, we do have a patent pending on the algae harvesting. And we're working now to expand that. We're going to be doing a project that allows us to now bring in an AI element to our algae harvesters. So we're not using as staff essentially on site. We essentially can get a an automation system going so we can monitor and execute these from a remote setting.
This is actually very, very interesting to me in this whole process and how you're doing that. And you had mentioned that people and agriculture were the causes of, and some of the practices of just how we live were part of the problems here in Florida, but you mentioned it's a worldwide problem. Are these problems in the underdeveloped or undeveloped countries? Or I know it's probably more exacerbated here, but you said it's worldwide. Are they having these problems in Africa where there's few people or there's deserts, or is it really just...
Well, yes, this is a worldwide issue, and you brought up Africa, and our company has offices in 40 countries, and the one thing good after COVID, we really got good at communicating without being in person. And I was on the phone last month with their Cape Town office, and they were running into these same types of problems of saying, we have an issue. We got harmful algal blooms. We now have a toxic issue in our waterways. Our water treatment systems are not capable of treating this. What can we do? So we're working with them now, providing counsel and trying to see how we can get our equipment over there. But we're seeing this in every other country.
So one of the things that got me excited about this was, in my conversation with Cynthia, was talking about Bonnet Springs Park, and which is a huge endeavor here in the Lakeland area, Polk County area, and they've got some fairly polluted bodies of water over there, the lagoon and Bonnet Spring, or Lake Bonnet. How did y'all get involved with Lake Bonnet and that project?
Well, after we had the initial research investigation in 2016 about the harmful algal blooms, what's available, we started collaborating and coming up with a technology that could be used. And we wanted to find a place to demonstrate that. So what better place than Lakeland, Florida? So I essentially picked up the phone and reached out to the city of Lakeland and got a hold of Lori Smith and introduced myself and said, would like to conduct some research on algae. We're looking for a lake that might have some algae so we can do our testing. We were funding this. This was an AECOM self-funded project. And Lori was like, Dan, we have plenty of lakes, and why don't you come over to Lake Bonnet? And the rest is history there. But we went out on that lake, and that was right before Bonnet Springs Park started to break ground. Right. And I had the opportunity to meet Bill Tinsley.
Yep, great
and
guy.
He showed us the vision. And at that point, I fell in love with the whole concept of Bonnet Springs Park. At that point, it was just drawing boards. And the lake had plenty of algae. We were able to really conduct a great test. But then the city and everything else in the county said, hey, we'd like to clean up these lakes. We just don't have the money to move forward with that. So we've been working with states and grants to figure out how we can move forward. And there was one grant that came up during COVID. This was a HUD grant that was given to the state of Florida. It was about $700 million plus. And we collaborated with the city of Lakeland and Bonnet Springs Park during COVID. And we all had masks on. We were all sitting there at the Bonnet Springs Park trailer. And we developed some concepts, and we put together an application. And unfortunately, it didn't get all of it funded, but it got the majority of it funded. But we had three parts. One was really to prevent downstream flooding. The other one was to look at dredging the lake. And the third was to provide water quality. We thought this would be a perfect opportunity to bring the harvesters in and such, but unfortunately, HUD's mission is really on the protection of flooding, not on water quality.
Right.
So we got two of those projects funded. We just kicked that off recently.
Where did that funding come from?
That came from HUD, and then that was directed now to the DOC, Department of Commerce.
Okay. Is that who's funding you now? Is that how we bring in?
No, actually,
Henderson, or?
so that was one project that we had we're able to bring in, and that's essentially providing about $42 million of funding to the city to look at reducing the flooding on the downstream area from Lake Bonnet into the May Manor area and so on. But we didn't give up. We wanted to find ways that we can bring a technology to Lakeland, into Polk County. So the state has innovation grants, and I'll turn that over to Cynthia to explain a little bit on how that process worked. But the good news, the city did win an innovation grant, and we're going to be taking our harvesters out. And instead of putting them on Lake Bonnet, because this is a research project,
Right.
we collaborated with Bonnet Springs Park and Bill Tinsley and Josh Henderson, and they are allowing us to put the harvester right there in the park. So I think this is going to provide a lot more visibility. As you know, the amount of visitors that come to that park is amazing. They have a greenhouse set up. We're going to be looking at taking the biomass and using it as fertilizer. But the other point I wanted to bring up, not only does algae be used in products or fertilizer, there's also an abundance of carbon that I mentioned. And we've been working with the Department of Energy on figuring out how we can take wild algae that's grown in the wild, in this case, harmful algal blooms, and convert that to clean energy. And again, not to get too techy, but there is a process by using heat and pressure, just like it does in nature for geology. Algae, the biomass, over millions of years, turns into crude oil. Through heat and pressure, carbon will transform into crude oil. So they meaning the Department of Energy, developed a process known as hydrothermal liquefaction. So essentially they add heat and pressure, and they can convert biomass, in this case wet algae, into crude oil and methane. So now we can have a technology that we can use that would allow us to provide carbon neutral crude oil. And this crude oil is almost identical in its properties to fossil crude. So it can be used for sustainable aviation fuel. So we're going to be bringing a mobile hydrothermal liquefaction unit to Bonnet Springs Park in the fall. And we're going to essentially take that wet biomass that we get out of the water and convert it to crude oil on site in about 30 minutes.
And will this be a piece of equipment? Will this be a display where the public can go by and see it, or is it going to be behind walls like, hey, this is still proprietary? Or
no, we're going to be holding tours. We're going to have a media day there. We want people to see it. We want people to interact with it. That was really why we wanted to be part of the Bonnet Springs Park area, so people can understand this.
Right.
It's all about bringing the technology and getting the next generation interested in science. And here, it's going to be hands-on. You're going to be able to see the green water come in, the clean water go out, and that green goo that we take out to be used as fertilizer on the park, and also to be converted to crude oil. And they can see that in the same day.
Bud Strang here, president of 610 LLC. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Would certainly encourage you to listen to Todd's podcast here in the future.
so all this must have a pretty hefty price tag that can't just be funded by Bonnet Springs Park, can't be funded just by AE. How are you, is that where you come in, Cynthia? Are you okay talking about this part?
Sure.
How did you get involved with these projects? Were you already involved with AECom, or were you part of when they brought it into Bonnet Springs?
Well, first of all, thank you for having us on today. One of the many, women parts of your fan club, so we appreciate being here. It was an interesting thing, as we develop our professional careers, we look for projects that have purpose and clients that do good. And I have a very dear friend, Lisa Miller, who is a animal person like me, always rescuing animals and looking for good. And we read a story about somebody taking their dog for a walk, and the dog drank water at a lake and got poisoned and, shook us up. So she said, we're going to find, a client who's going to fix this water. And as Lisa does, she's amazing. She starts cold calling engineering firms, and she gets this guy on the phone. And of course, they hit it off and, talked about how to save the world through drinking water and for pets and animals. So that's how we got involved with AECOM, and it was many years ago. And what we do with our project is just, enable relationships with government agencies and private sector and help them find grants. And, we, in this particular project, it's kind of like all the stars aligned because we had a governor that was very interested in it. We had legislators that, were having these big issues in their backyard. And we have a great economy that was generating, money. So the governor, Governor Scott started it, and we worked very closely with the Department of Environmental Protection. They're a very strong agency. They're not political. They don't change with each administration. They just look to protect the environment. And we have a legislature that's extraordinarily focused on that, like nothing I've seen in my decades of work. So, we've been able to work with them, educate them on this. We had an emergency bloom in Southwest Florida, and one of the members that I was going around talking to about this, trying to get everybody educated on it and aware and put it in the pipeline for funding, called and said, my residents are having this horrible smell in their yards, and dogs are dying. What can you do? You've been talking to me about this. How do we fix it? And so Dan and his team went down there and did almost like an emergency spill issue where they got all the green up, and then we just kept talking with them, and it's turned into the legislature has funded. The governor said, I'm going to be the most environmental governor that's ever been, and he's funded.
Scott or DeSantis said this?
Well, Scott was doing it, but then DeSantis said, I'm going to do over $1 billion in funding in my term.
Wow.
And so he has legislature that has backed him on that, and they work really hard on it. And we had resistance in the beginning. One of the members told me that I was taking money from his budget, and there was no such thing. But once the blooms hit, and it really hit, he's become a strong fan of it since then. But so that's how we've got the support of the legislature, and really, DEP has been the big advocate for us on that. We educate them. They don't really care about vendors. They don't look at that. They just look at come up with research-based projects.
Solve a problem and pilots. And our big issue right now is moving from the research side to actually cleaning up a big water body like Hancock or Lake O, because these research projects now have been going on for many years, and we need to move it to the next stage. So how do you engage local legislative delegations to assist you? Do you make it personal about Bonnet Springs and you get the Polk delegation, or those that are here, or Okeechobee? How on your side, on the lobbying side of it, on the relationship side, you don't have to tell me all your secrets, but you're obviously a relationship person, and you create these relationships. How do you go against the ones who aren't all excited? You said one budget guy said, don't take money from my budget, and you've got other local legislators who are very favorable and look upon this with a good light.
Well, again, stars aligning. You have an amazing legislator, Melody Bell, who's here, and we just went to her with the Lake Bonnet when we realized that the HUD grant wasn't going to cover water quality. Huge part of that lake was for the water quality portion. So we went to her and asked if she would initiate what is called a legislative budget request. So part of the annual budget. So the budget has multiple components. DEP does their main budget, which is the innovative technology, or other really big projects that they're focused on. One of them, they have the water management districts that identify lakes within their water bodies and the total maximum daily load in each lake and all of those sorts of things. Tens of millions of dollars into that each year. But then individual members will do requests. And because the Publix family's been so strong here, and Bonnet Springs Park folks are so strong there, we do a joint request. It's the park that does it. We just identify for groups like that what is available and what to ask for. And then the legislator decides whether that is meaningful to their community. And so it's not an AECOM ask, it's a Bonnet Springs Park ask. We
Right.
just help identify what it is and how to work it over the long term and that sort of thing.
So is there going to be money available to what Dan's wanting
Yes.
to do to fix this? What kind of money are we talking about? And it's got to be a multi-year commitment. It can't be one.
We wish. So part of them, one of the pots was the innovative technology grant that they did with Lakeland. And then this particular one was the legislative budget request that Representative Bell got for this particular community. And Dan can talk about the specifics of that. But we've had multiple opportunities with this because Lakeland, the city of Lakeland is one of the applicants on the innovative technology, and then Bonnet Springs does the legislative budget request. So there's a bunch of different pipelines to do it. And then the legislature looks at it, and you've got great leadership who's, very aware and wanting to do good projects like this. And this is one of those that is, really good for the community. The community has invested money into developing this, the business partners and local governments. So it's all got to be a project that is shared by everybody. Again, not vendor driven. It's really project driven. With that, we help do it, and luckily, with part of legislative budget request, doesn't have to go through a procurement process because you work it. They kind of do that at the legislative side when they give that particular allocation.
We have so many contaminated, not clean lakes. Contaminated may be the wrong word. Polk County needs to hire you, Cynthia.
They have a great lobbyist already. I don't like to steal
I know they do,
others.
but I'll give them your number if you need it.
No, thank you. They have a great lobbyist,
I
and he works hard on it. But no, what you look for, and I think what the legislature looks for in a lot of these projects, is something that's going to benefit not just a water body that's somewhere. It's this particular one. The community's been so strong on building a park,
Right.
and helping the mobile home park that's by there, so it's not flooding. It's a very well thought out project. There are. Was there almost 400 million given to local projects around the state this year? As again, we are very fortunate in Florida to have a lot of money being able to flow. One of the great things the legislature did this past year is the gaming money with, doing online gaming or whatever you call that, betting. They're putting that money into environment and building trails and saving the world. They have a project for Lake Okeechobee, which is a procurement process that the department's going through to be able to do these big projects. Each is funded on a yearly basis. As you remember with the legislature, It's a yearly thing. Some of the projects, like the Lake O funding, is 3 years at a time because it's fixed capital outlay. But it goes, each year as they do it, it takes it from 3 years to 6 years.
Right.
So, we work on trying to educate a lot of what happens in the legislature is you ask for money and then you don't tell them what actually happened with the money. So it's hard to get it year after year in this particular case because we have DEP staff that's so interested in this. You have the Blue-Green Algae Task Force. You have a lot of money going into fixing this particular project. And a lot of that is due to Dan education and the success that they've seen with this. The Department of Agriculture, for example, told us this is the only technology they know of that actually removes the phosphorus and nitrates from the water. And that is the huge problem in the water bodies in Florida. And they had before, they look for the wetlands to drain it and to filter it through. Naturally, the water goes through down to the center of the earth and it filtrates it that way. This is the first one that they've become aware of that actually removes it and puts clean water and doesn't have a negative detriment. You go to Disney World and they have beautiful water, but they pour hydrogen peroxide in it basically and kill everything that's in the water. It's a way to do it, and it looks good and it's quick and it's fast, but it's really not a long-term solution for the quality of water in Florida, and that's what Dan's really focused on.
So the water that you return back, totally different than what you just said about Disney or some of the other bodies that have been compromised. It's not necessarily potable, but it starts growing vegetation, animals, fish right away, or does it always get destroyed down to zero that you have to build back from zero?
Well, no. I mean, the process returns that water clear. And what happens when you have clear water? It means the sunlight can penetrate.
Okay.
So the benthic habitat, everything that lives on the bottom of the lakes or the shoreline, needs that sunlight. And what happens when the algae gets so predominant, that blocks it out. Or in this case, when you looked at the algae, you really can't see through that jar because the sunlight can't penetrate any real distance. By returning the clean water back, it will mix with the water there, but it would provide enough clarity so we can start getting that sunlight back to where it was originally and getting the natural aquatic plants to start to grow. What we saw in the IRL on the Indian River is that the manatee were starving because the seagrasses were dying because they really were shielded from the sunlight. So that changes a whole ecosystem. So that was in the saltwater brackish area. When you get into freshwater, same thing happens. So we do use as a nation tools, which we have to. And one of those, as Cynthia was pointing out, was peroxide. Another one is copper sulfate. These are effective, and we do need them. And agriculture uses them, and so on. But we can't use that as the only hammer. And we go out west, especially in the California area, they use it extensively because their drinking water reservoirs are above ground. And if they get toxic algae, they have to kill them. But the consequence is you're now adding copper. And you do that for not just a year, but for decades and decades, you're now going to have copper poisoning. So to Cynthia's point, we have to find ways that work with nature, not against it, because nature always wins.
You know, if we're not paying attention to our water, we got big problems. And I'm not sure we've always paid appropriate amount of attention to water, but it sounds like we are starting to. It sounds like we're starting to do that all across the country, if they're doing it in California or whatever. But how can people get involved, or how can they learn more about what you're doing? Are you looking for people? Are you looking for an awareness out there? Do they need to contact our local legislative group? Do they need to contact you if they, hey, I've got an idea, or I just want to know more about what you're doing?
Well, and just to step back a bit, and we, because of the size of our company and our footprint, we do get the opportunity to do a lot of travel around our country. And I would have to say Florida, out of all the states, is leading the efforts in harmful algal blooms.
We'll start with Cynthia's friend.
Yeah.
Called you up cold calling, and she saw a problem and she wanted to fix it. So way to go, Lisa.
And those of you who have not met Lisa Miller, she is a absolute force, and she's really been a huge friend and counsel and how we can move this forward. And that's what we're trying to do. I mean, I had my head down with my team, focused on developing a solution. We have spent 7 years now on the drawing board and working with the Army Corps of Engineers, working with the EPA, working with the Department of Energy, and we've had success after success. The algae harvesting technology works. It's scalable. We have a byproduct for it. So now we need, and this isn't just a Polk County issue. I mean, this is really each state and each governor needs to really help move this forward, and also with the federal government. I would like to give compliments to Congressman Mast on the East Coast and Congressman Donalds on the West Coast. Both are actively trying to solve this problem. There's now a HABs to Fuel Act that's being developed by Congressman Donald's office, which I think is great. We need that. We need the federal help. We need the state help. What we're trying to do is see this as a public-private partnership. We need everybody. This isn't just one firm doing it. This is a village. This is everybody working together. So to your point, yes, the residents that see this, if we don't start taking action soon, we're going to end up with a lot of water bodies with protective tape over them, do not enter, more caution signs coming up. We don't want that. People come to Florida because of our water. And if we start shielding them or preventing them access, then we're just going down the wrong path.
Hey everybody, this is your host Todd Dantzler, and I hope you're enjoying this episode. I would like to take a moment to do a shameless plug for my real estate business. As most of you know, I'm a partner with SVN Saunders Ralston Dantzler Real Estate, but I am also a working broker who is very active in listing and selling real estate. I've been in this business for over 41 years. I know, you're thinking he can't be, he's so young looking, but no, it's true. I've been actively listing and selling commercial real estate my entire working career on properties ranging from ag land to multifamily projects to office and commercial and industrial properties. I have held the distinguished CCIM designation since 1991. This is the highest designation you can achieve in the commercial real estate field. I believe that a big part of my success in the real estate business is because of the relationships that I have fostered throughout the state of Florida and also right here in Polk County. So if you have any real estate needs in buying or selling, please give me a call to see if I can help out. My direct line to my desk is 863-877-2846. Again, that's 863-877-2846. You said if we don't start doing it soon, it sounds like we're already 2, 3, 4 decades late. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of time to sit around and contemplate our navel. We need to get going on this. And we've got, 343 million listeners to this podcast, Eli?
344 million.
Give or take a million. And how does the public get involved? Do they need to write their legislator? Do they need to write the governor? You don't want to write just a letter. You want to write an effective letter or contact them when you see them around. Cynthia, maybe this is...
Well, that's a great question, and it's really important because what happens is we need advocates at the local government level primarily. We go to them and ask for this, and they have a lot of things to do every day of the week. So
you go to the local government or the
local government,
okay,
like county commissioners, city commissioners, staff. Well, you were busy, but they need to say, yes, this is something, we want to do, because what we do is we work hand in hand with them to do different requests for fundings and for projects that are there. Everybody is busy and everybody doesn't have enough money, right? So they need help finding funding sources, and we have that, but we just need each of the, commissioners, city council members all over the state to say, I want this to start in my community. And the great news is once it starts, it can keep building and building and cleaning up out there being a unique thing, but it's awareness and it's actually taking action and finding those advocates at the local level that want to start doing this within their communities. We talk to a lot of people, but there's only a couple of us. Lisa and I trying to educate local commissioners to get this to happen, but spreading it to all the water bodies is really important because it is a tool to do it. When we first started, they were doing it in China, Lake
Tai in China.
And that was their drinking water source, and it was also where the sewer was being dumped. So this is where it started, and it's done an amazing job cleaning up there, which is why we knew it was scalable to Lake O, which is here. So now it's taking the funding that's out there and turning it into long-term. We've done a lot of research. We know what's there. Research, this is one of the tools in the tool bucket, as Dan talked about. It's not the only thing, and it's not, that you don't go into a lake and it's all of a sudden it's magic. It is a long-term thing because it just keeps happening.
Right.
The septic tanks are feeding fertilizers, everybody's adding to it, and it goes from the north down to Lake O, and then it goes out C41 and C43. It goes, to Mass and Donaldson, to all of their people. So the cleaner we can get it before it starts going into the Everglades and the Lake O, the better off it is, because all the headwaters from here go down there. So if we clean it up here and send it down there clean, it goes through the whole state. It benefits everybody in Florida. It's not just a Lakeland positive benefit.
But it sounds like it's got to be local people making this a priority of their local leaders, elected officials.
It is.
To make it a priority for them.
Right.
And it can't just be local environmental groups. It's got to be the rank and file of everybody out there making this a priority to talk to their city commissioners or county commissioners.
All projects that happen are a team effort. Nobody does
But
it
it's got
individually.
to start local.
I think the
Grassroots
best way it is to start local and get up there. The legislators understand, they fund it because
Right.
DEP wants it, right? This is
Someone's got to tell them it's important.
someone's got to make the request because they have a lot of requests again
Right.
up there, but it's never been, I haven't had a member who wasn't, gung ho to get it done within their particular project because it's a very apparent, it's a very obvious improvement and it's very cost effective for what it is. And, and we have the buy off for DEP. So it's not often, it's not those that get on the veto list because
Right.
it's some special interest or whatever. This is a definite public interest project, but the best way it starts is at the local level and bubbles up to the top.
But what is the message that the local citizens need to take to their city and county commissioners? You don't want 50 people going with 50 different messages to the mayor of Winter Haven or Lakeland. Is there something out there that says this is the, do you just say, hey, clean up our water and let them figure it out? Or do you want to say, hey, we've got a process, you need to start doing a better job of
Well, I
whatever? I hate to turn people loose with a whole bunch of different directions that they're going.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to come here, Todd, to be part of this podcast, because it's really going to take a lot of effort. It's a complex problem. It's not easily understood. It's not an end of pipe. You just can't point a finger at it. But it is a problem. And if we don't start taking action soon, right, we are behind the 8 ball. So we have to start moving quickly. So anything that we can do, anything you can recommend, we're open to that.
Well, is there a point person? Again, you can't have 50 different messages. You've kind of got to, is there a website that everyone's populating on? I don't do social media, but is there a place that someone goes that said, hey, I'm listening, you're spreading the word. Where do I go to learn more about what you're doing? And the technical side of what you're doing maybe is not as important to the people. They got to get the sense of urgency into the local officials. You need to do your job because you know what you're doing, and you're the one who actually gets contracted to clean up the body of water.
Right.
But somehow we've got to get it to the local officials, say this has got to be important to you.
And I think the state has done a great job establishing a blue-green algae task force.
Okay.
And I think that would be really the filtering part of that, Cynthia?
Well, I think you go to your county administrator, your city manager, and say this particular water body is a problem, and I heard that there's money available at the state level, and then they get in touch with AECOM, and we work together to do an application for that particular jurisdiction to get it done. That's a really easy way and the most effective way to get it done.
So the citizens don't have to be water wonks. They've just got to say, hey,
This is a problem. I see
is a
this in my
problem. Can you
community.
make
It's
this
gross.
right?
I want it cleaned up, and I know where there's money because I know you've divvied up your resources in different places. I know these people can help you get this funded, and it gets it on top of mind for them.
And there's no shortage of people who go to their local elected officials saying, hey, can you fix this road? Can you do this? And that's part of it. And so we just need to be, this is part of the ask to our local officials. That's what I was really trying to figure out
Right.
is, if it's, hey, this is a body of water, can you contact, your legislators? Can you make this an important thing? So does that sound
Yes,
like I'm
that's
not
what they
creating-
do. And then the county manager or the city, manager goes to the public works department or the engineering department or environmental department that they have, depending on how big they are. And then they get in touch with AECOM and say, okay, do our paperwork for us because we don't have enough time to fill out these grant applications and, legislative budget requests and that sort of thing. And then Dan calls me and we go to the legislator that's local and say, here, we would like you to put this in as one of your 10 requests or however many requests they have.
Okay. So our local county manager is Bill Beasley. If you want to call him, feel free to give Bill a call. If he asks why you're calling him, don't tell him you heard it here, because I don't need him bringing his wrath upon me, but Bill's a great guy and an engineer by trade. As we wrap up, is there anything I have not asked you that you thought maybe you would want me to or should have? I mean, again, this is a different scientific world than I'm used to being in. Did I leave something out that you should have thought you really should have said this or asked this?
Well, I just want to share one other piece. While we were focused on the problem, which is, how to solve something that created a problem, in this case, harmful algal blooms, we also are working on research now to prevent them. Essentially taking the dissolved, and this is where I wanted to make the differential. As nutrients leave agricultural lands and septic tanks and sewers, they're dissolved, essentially available, like dissolved sugar. So something is going to eat them. In this case, algae will consume the dissolved nitrogen and phosphorus in the water. But if we can find ways to prevent that from coming into the waterways, that's going to be a great thing. So we just didn't stop on algae harvesting. I've also developed the ACT program, which is the Advanced Algae Cultivation. So essentially, we worked with Polk County, and Polk County is receiving a grant through the Innovation Fund to test the ACT program on Saddle Creek. This is the upper Saddle Creek waterway before it goes into Hancock. So later this year, we'll be looking at using algae to fight algae. So we're going to essentially take the water out of Saddle Creek. We're going to grow a cultivated algae strain to pick up the dissolved nitrogen and phosphorus and return back clean water. Now, that algae is going to be used as fertilizer. We're cultivating it in a specific way. So now we can look at turning the faucet off. So while we got to clean up what's there, and to your point, decades, if not a century of old nutrients we got to fix, but we also got to turn the faucet off. So we're looking at ways that we can do this, and if we can, again, use algae to fight algae, harness the power of algae to take the nutrients out in a positive way, in a controlled setting, we essentially are going to be on our way. So, but these innovations, while we think about them, we develop them here, it's through the legislative funding in our state to allow us to come out here and showcase them and get everybody to understand how these processes could be worked. So it's exciting, and we're going to be spending a lot of time in Polk County, specifically in Lakeland, and we hope your viewers get an opportunity to come out. We'd love to showcase our operations and demonstrate how we can move forward in a sustainable fashion.
Out of Bonnet Springs.
Out of Bonnet Springs.
And Bonnet Springs is a free park, folks. You don't have to pay an admission to go there, and it sounds like they're going to be setting up something to be a little more interactive with the public to learn more about this. And you mentioned Saddle Creek and cleaning that up, and was there a legislator that worked that you want to mention? That I know you mentioned Melanie Bell on Bonnet Springs. Was there another? I'd love giving credit where credit is due, because I give them lots of crap, and they deserve that too. So I'm happy to give a praise and a commercial for them.
That's what I was going to say. There's always a lot of negative with what's going on with elected officials, and I don't think they get enough praise for the good work that the Governor Ron DeSantis has done. Sean Hamilton, the Secretary of DEP, he's got great staff. Adam Blaylock and Ed Smith, they are spending every day tirelessly looking for how to keep Florida safe from the environmental perspective, and it's amazing. And then, we have the Speaker and the Senate President, which Brenner and Pasadomo, that were super focused on.
We got Albritton coming up, hopefully, in a year.
We've got Albritton coming up next year. Yeah, from Polk County, and he was Appropriations Chair. We've got a lot of really strong representatives and senators that help in this particular area, and that were particularly helpful in these projects. So they should be applauded for their dedication to the environment. This money can go in many different ways, and I think in the last 8 years or so, the focus that they've put 6 years, the focus that they've put on preserving the environment and cleaning up the environment has been unprecedented, and they should be really recognized for that, because I don't think that positive gets out there.
Well, it is so easy to slam a legislator or slam an elected official, and I was one, and there's times that we deserved it and there's times that we didn't. And, we're all human and sometimes we make mistakes, but most of us try to do the right thing when we can. Any parting words, you want to do a brief 30 seconds on AECOM, how to get in touch with you, or same thing with you, Cynthia, just tell us a little bit, if they want more information, how do I find out more about it?
Well, yes, and thank you, Todd. This has been a great opportunity for us to share some of the work that we're doing in algae. Our organization, we have 55,000 people. We have well over 1,000 in the state of Florida. We really try to push the envelope on leading research, on doing all sorts of infrastructure work. We see Florida as one of our home states. I've been here for 3 decades. I want to do everything I can to keep our water clean. And I think the Polk County work is really going to set not just the state of Florida, but could be a beacon for our country where cutting edge research is being done. So, really, I want to give a shout out to the city of Lakeland, Florida, to Bonnet Springs Park, and to you for giving us this platform. Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia, you want to tell us about yourself and how we can hire you if we want to?
I'll take a pass on that one, but I want to talk about, I'm very honored with what I do. I love what I do, being a, facilitator with business and government, but really business is there to make money, and AECOM is a business, but They have spent so much time and money on protecting the environment and research that they really should be applauded for what they do, because there's not a lot of companies that will dedicate the resources and the attention like this one has done for this. They do a lot of things. They build roads and water and sewer, and they clean up PFAS from firefighters and, the spray foam, and they clean up hazardous waste dump. They do everything. But in this particular area, they have really dedicated the resources to do this. And they've been patient with it because government takes a long time. It's always, I tell clients, it's 5 times longer than you think to get from where you are to getting the funding that's there. And they have been very focused on that, and they should be applauded for that because it is a business. They need to make money, and we are trudging along little baby steps at a time to get there. But I think Florida is really going to see the benefit, and they have gotten so good at it, and DEP has gotten so good at it that they will have legislators, governors, and people, communities in New York, in the Hamptons saying, hey, I heard you guys are doing this amazing project, because AECOM has won awards all over the nation for this particular project, that they are calling and saying, how do we get in touch with them? Because this is really incredible. So they are in, New York, Pennsylvania, California, Michigan, they're everywhere doing it. But, it takes time to develop this technology, and the state has been very good at helping with fund that, that particular focus for cleaning the environment. So it's pretty exciting.
And I remember one of the pieces you sent me for my research was there was photos of you and Governor DeWine out of Ohio at a project that was were you on, was that your project?
Yes.
Or was that, okay.
Yeah, and that one...
Again, that goes what you said, that people are coming from all over the United States to find out about what you're doing in AECOM. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and it was funny, whenever you have a governor come out, they usually have an entourage, and we were given a couple of minutes, and his entourage pretty much said, we want the governor here. The governor brought his wife out, Fran, and they were with us for about an hour and a half, and they were involved. They climbed up on the harvester. They were walking around. They saw the oil coming out, and that was the first time that we were able to bring all of our tools out to one job site, and we essentially harvested algae out of Harsha Lake, which is right outside of Cincinnati, and turned it into crude oil in the afternoon, and it just was amazing. So to show all of that, and we had the Army Corps of Engineers out there, we had the Department of Energy out there, we had the Ohio DNR out, and that project really allowed us to showcase its full capability. Now we're going to be doing that exact same test here at Bonnet Springs Park. So for those that didn't get a chance to see it there, we were going to be able to come out here in Polk County and see it at the park.
Well, I appreciate y'all coming out and spending an hour with us to tell us a little bit about what you do and trying to come up with a solution and actually coming up with a solution to very important problems that we have here, not just in Florida, but all over the world with water and algae and how to contain all that. Dan, thank you very much. Cynthia, thank you very much for bringing this to my attention and facilitating this. You're great as always. And thank you, Eli, again. Again, thank you all for coming, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, I want to thank you for listening to Todd's podcast. This has been your host, Todd Dantzler. If you enjoyed today's podcast, I hope you'll join us next time where we talk to David Carmichael, an attorney with Boswell and Dunlap and Bartow, where we talk about the Florida Risk Protection Order, also known as the Red Flag Law, which came about after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting tragedy. So I think it's a great episode. I think you'll learn a lot, and hope you'll tune in for David's episode. As always, don't forget to rate, review, follow, and subscribe to Todd's podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you have any questions for me or any suggestions for future guests, please call or text our number at 863-288-0944 or visit todddantzler.com. Again, that's 863-288-0944 or visit my website, todddantzler.com. I look forward to hearing your questions and feedback, and please take care.